Have you ever wondered what you would do if you walked into a luxury hotel, one you secretly own, and were told right to your face that people like you don't belong here? Would you shout? Would you leave quietly? Or would you stand still, knowing that in less than 10 minutes you'd be in charge of everyone who just humiliated you? This isn't a story about privilege or power. It's a story about humiliation, quiet fury, and the power of reclaiming what's yours. So before we begin, comment your city below and tell me honestly, if you saw this moment unfolding in front of you, would you have spoken up or would you have looked away? Let's rewind to how it all began. Seattle's Horizon Grand Hotel was a palace built on marble and pretense. The lobby was all gold accents, velvet chairs, and perfumed air. It was the kind of place that promised exclusivity, where a certain type of guest could always expect to be treated like royalty, and another type would always be watched just a little too closely. On a wet Monday afternoon, Dr. Amira Blake stepped through the revolving glass doors. She wore plain jeans and a fitted black tee. Her sneakers, once white, were rain-spattered. No designer handbag, no obvious luxury. Just a calm, focused presence and eyes that had seen this scenario before. Enough times to be tired of it, but never enough to get used to it. She crossed the marble floor at a measured pace, feeling the slight hush that fell over the space as her presence was noted by the staff. It was always the same. The micro pause, the subtle tightening of smiles, the way the desk clerks straightened, readying themselves for a problem guest. At the reception, Gregory Vance was waiting. He was the sort of man who took pride in the power of saying no with a smile. 54, silver hair perfectly parted, navy suit tailored and spotless. Gregory stood like a sentry. He had been at Horizon Grand for over a decade, and in that time, he'd become a gatekeeper for a certain standard of guest. At his sides were Lauren Meadows, a woman with an artificial smile, always quick with a company policy excuse, and Kevin Chudhuri, whose nervous energy masked a hunger to impress his boss. Amira approached. Gregory barely glanced up, making a show of finishing a note before deigning to acknowledge her. When he did, he looked her up and down, taking in the lack of visible wealth, the brown skin, the plainness. "Yes," the word came out clipped. "I have a reservation," Amira replied, her voice low but clear. "Blake, penthouse suite." Lauren looked up from her monitor. "The penthouse?" She sounded surprised, then skeptical. Kevin cocked his head. "Are you sure you meant this hotel?" His tone wasn't quite mocking, but it wasn't far. Amira didn't flinch. She placed her ID and her sleek, heavy black credit card on the counter. Reservation for Dr. Amira Blake. Gregory picked up the card as if it might stain him. He turned it over with two fingers, looked at the ID, then back at Amira, eyes narrowing. "Strain," he muttered, making sure to speak just loud enough for the lobby to hear. "We don't usually see this sort of thing." The line behind Amira grew longer, guests glancing up from their phones, a few openly watching. Lauren pressed a discreet button under the desk. "Security to the front. Possible unauthorized guest. Suspected fraud." Her voice, though directed into the intercom, was pitched for maximum drama. Amira heard the words, felt the old, cold humiliation bubbling under her skin. But she didn't let it show. Instead, she recalled another lobby in Atlanta years before, her first big business trip, when a desk clerk told her the system was down and to come back when the manager's around. She'd slept in her rental car, freezing, and swore she'd never let it happen again. But it was happening again, here, now in her own building. From a velvet chair nearby, a young woman named Sierra pulled out her phone, nudging her boyfriend Daniel. "Record this," she whispered. Daniel started a live stream, murmuring, "We're at the Horizon Grand. They're about to kick out a black woman for booking a penthouse." Gregory leaned in, lowering his voice just enough for Amira to hear, but not so low that the guests behind her couldn't catch the edges. "You know, we see this scam all the time. Someone shows up with a high-limit card, a name they can't pronounce, and a reservation they can't back up. Then they disappear as soon as we call the bank." He turned to Kevin, who took the card with a flourish and walked over to a steel safe behind the desk. He slid the card inside and locked it. "That's theft," Sierra said loudly, drawing more eyes. Gregory ignored her. "Your reservation is canceled," he said to Amira. You're holding up real guests. Amira stayed perfectly still. Her calm was not the calm of submission. It was the calm of someone who has chosen not to break. You mean the real guests who are filming you right now? She replied, her eyes flicking towards Sierra and Daniel. Lauren stepped from behind the desk, a little too close, her smile now a grim line. You need to leave, now, or we'll call the authorities. Amira met her gaze without blinking. Are you sure you want to do this? Lauren's confidence wavered, but she pressed on. Positive. You're making a scene. Gregory folded his arms. Go ahead. Make a scene. It won't end well for you. Amira didn't back down. That's the last time you'll speak to me like that. Behind the desk, Elena Ruiz, a young, soft-spoken concierge, looked up from her computer, concern flickering in her eyes. She took a hesitant step forward. Actually, I saw Dr. Blake's name in the system this morning. Penthouse suite, it's valid. Gregory snapped at her. Elena, one more word and you're gone too. Amira pulled out her phone, dialing her executive assistant, Nina. It's happening, she said quietly. Nina's voice was calm. The system's ready, Amira. Gregory, oblivious to the call, leaned back, projecting for the crowd. We've seen this scam before. People like her come in, claim to have bookings, flash a fancy card. Well, not today. Kevin grinned, pressing his advantage. Your card is company property now until we verify it. You're not getting it back. The lobby was buzzing. Daniel's live stream showed the count climbing past 100. Comments streamed in, most outraged, some in disbelief. Amira stood her ground. You're going to regret this, Lauren sneered. Is that a threat? Amira looked her dead in the eyes. Number? It's a promise. A memory flashed. Amira, 16, sitting in a hotel lobby in Charlotte, waiting for her parents, told by a clerk. This area is for guests only. She tried to explain, but they escorted her to the sidewalk. The shame had burned, but it didn't break her. It made her sharper. Now, with every eye in the lobby fixed on her, Amira stepped into the storm, unbothered, unbroken, and more powerful than anyone could guess. The world can change in less than 10 minutes. Sometimes it takes just one look, one word, one act of defiance to send a ripple through an entire system built on silent rules and invisible barriers. For Amira Blake, every second in that lobby was an echo of the thousands of indignities she'd endured before. But today she felt the quiet thunder in her chest, the certainty that this time would be different. This time she would not simply endure, she would change everything. As Lauren's fingers closed around Amira's arm, the room seemed to inhale at once. The delicate clinking of glasses from the hotel bar faded. The gentle strains of piano music dissolved into static. For a moment, even the golden light from the chandeliers seemed to freeze, caught in the tension arching across the marble lobby. The touch was not violent, but it was possessive, a physical claim, an assertion of power. Amira's eyes flicked to Lauren's grip, then up to her face. There was a tremor in Lauren's hand, a glimmer of uncertainty behind her perfect smile. But still, she held on, determined to finish what she'd started. That single gesture was all it took to unleash the crowd. Sierra, hands trembling but voice steady, raised her phone even higher. Did you all see that? She just grabbed her. Sierra's words pierced the hush, her outrage infectious. Around the room, heads turned. Phones went up. Even the staff behind the desk. Kevin, pretending not to watch. Elena, her eyes wide with worry, could not ignore what was happening. Daniel, standing a few paces away, brought his live stream closer. This is happening live at the Horizon Grand, he said to his growing audience. And I don't think the staff realized just how many people are watching. His chat scrolled faster than he could read. Is this America in 2025? Someone typed. This is why people don't trust these places, wrote another. Stay strong, sis. Amira's voice when it came was almost too quiet for the microphone to catch, but it rang with clarity. Let go of me. She did not shout, did not plead. Her command was calm, cold, absolute. Lauren's grip loosened as if burned. She drew back, flustered, her composure finally cracking. I'm just following protocol. You're not in the system. You don't look... She stopped herself just short of the word. but everyone heard it. You don't look like you belong here. It was then that Elena, breaking free from her post at the concierge stand, stepped forward. Her shoes tapped smartly on the marble, a sound that felt brave in the sudden stillness. Her name is in the system, Elena announced, her voice trembling at first, then hardening. I saw it myself this morning. Dr. Amira Blake, penthouse suite, VIP status. A tremor of uncertainty rippled across the desk. Kevin's smirk faded. Gregory's eyes narrowed, his authority challenged for the first time. Elena, that's enough, he said sharply. You want to join her on the street? You know the rules. Elena's cheeks colored, but she stood her ground. Not this time. Amira glanced at her, the ghost of a grateful smile passing between them. For the first time since entering the lobby, Amira felt the weight in her chest lighten, if only for a second. She wasn't entirely alone, but Gregory was not ready to surrender his domain. He slammed his hand down on the counter, making the decorative pens jump in their holders. This is my hotel, he declared, voice rising, and I decide who belongs here. Security is on its way. You, he jabbed a finger at Amira, need to leave before things get ugly. Amira's phone was already in her hand, her thumb gliding with quiet confidence over the screen. In the silent, glass-walled office 3 blocks away, Nina answered on the first ring. It's happening, Amira said, her voice steady. Nina replied, System is ready. Do you want me to start the recording? Yes, log every second and tell Carla to stand by for escalation. At that word, escalation, Amira's shoulders straightened, her presence seeming to fill the lobby. She looked back at Gregory, who faltered for just a heartbeat. The power in the room had shifted, even if he didn't understand how. Guests were no longer pretending not to notice. A man in a navy suit stepped forward, folding his arms. Is this how you treat all your guests? He asked, voice booming. Or just the black ones? Gregory turned, ready to dismiss the challenge, but found himself facing a wall of faces, many with phones out, some with anger in their eyes, others with tears. The woman with the floral scarf now stood between Amira and Lauren, a silent but unmovable barrier. The mother with the stroller gently rolled her child between Amira and the front desk, as if to shield her from harm. Lauren's voice shook as she tried one last time to assert control. You're not in the system. We're following procedure. Elena didn't blink. That's not true. Her name is marked owner, level clearance. At the word owner, a ripple went through the lobby. Gregory's face blanched, but he pressed on, desperation rising in his tone. Anyone can say that. She could have hacked our system. People like her. Finish that sentence, Amira said, her voice low and dangerous. The threat in her words was not violence, but exposure. She was daring him to reveal himself, and he could not meet her eyes. Kevin, who had been silent for the last few minutes, finally spoke. Look, I was just following Gregory's instructions. I locked the card away, just like I was told. His voice cracked, his confidence gone. What if we're wrong? Gregory wheeled on him. We are not wrong. We have policies for a reason. Sierra cut in, still filming. Your policy is theft. You took her card and now you're lying about it. Jacob, live streaming, addressed the crowd directly. We're up to 4,000 viewers. If you think what's happening is wrong, let them know. The comments exploded. Fire them all. She owns the place, doesn't she? This is justice in real time. Gregory's jaw clenched. He turned to Lauren. Call the police. But Lauren's hands were shaking too badly to hold her phone. Elena stepped between them, firm now, voice rising above the chaos. If you call the police on the owner of this hotel, you'll be explaining it to the board and to the media because everyone here is recording. A hush fell, heavy as thunder. For a moment, all you could hear was the hum of air conditioning and the anxious tapping of fingers on glass screens. Amira lifted her phone to her ear. Nina, escalate to Carla. Patch her in on speaker. Gregory, watching the maneuver, looked confused for the first time. Who are you calling? Amira looked him dead in the eyes. Someone who can do what I'm about to do. Within seconds, Carla's voice echoed through the speakerphone, sharp and efficient. Amira, we're ready. Confirm authorization? Amira stared straight at Gregory, Lauren, and Kevin. Terminate Gregory Vance. Terminate Lauren Meadows. Terminate Kevin Chudhury. Freeze their access. Log this incident for legal and HR audit. A hush swept through the crowd. The former staff's badges buzzed and flashed red. Lauren's access locked out. Kevin's card rejected. Gregory's phone screen went blank. His privileges erased, instantly and irrevocably. He gaped, pale and sweating. You can't. This isn't how things are done. Elena, now emboldened, approached the safe and, with a code only an executive would know, retrieved Amira's card. She handed it back, her hands steady at last. Amira turned to the guests, her voice carrying through the marble and glass. This isn't just about me. This is about every guest ever made to feel small, or criminal, or invisible. It ends today, not behind closed doors. Here, where everyone can see. Soft applause broke out, tentative at first, then growing. The woman with the floral scarf dabbed at her eyes. The man in the navy suit gave a low whistle of admiration. Jacob's camera swung around, capturing the moment as history in motion. Gregory, stripped of power, tried one last desperate plea. Why didn't you say who you were? Why did you set us up? Amira didn't hesitate. I didn't set you up. I gave you the chance to do the right thing. You chose this. Lauren's composure collapsed. Gregory told us. He said to protect the brand, that people who don't look right shouldn't be in the penthouse. I was just doing what I was told. Her voice was barely a whisper, her mask finally gone. Amira nodded, her expression grave. You made your choices. Now you live with them. Carla's voice returned on speaker. The board is notified. The press team is preparing a statement. All security footage is being archived. Elena Ruiz will serve as acting manager effective immediately. Dr. Blake, do you wish to address the staff? Amira turned to the crowd, guests, witnesses, the new acting manager. I am not here for vengeance. I am here for justice and for reform. Today, Horizon Grand becomes what it should have always been, a place where every guest is welcome and every staff member is held accountable. As the applause rose, Amira allowed herself, for the first time in years, to exhale. The 9 minutes were over, but the real work, building something better, was only just beginning. The hush that swept over the Horizon Grand lobby in the aftermath of Amira's decisive act was not the quiet of confusion, nor was it the hush of defeat. It was the kind of quiet that falls before the first drop of rain, the moment when everyone realizes the old rules no longer apply. There was no more pretending. The balance of power had shifted, and in its wake, every eye was on Amira. Some filled with hope, some with regret, some with unspoken gratitude. For Gregory, Lauren, and Kevin, those 9 minutes felt like a lifetime unraveling in reverse. Their world, once neatly ordered and reinforced by habit, policy, and silent prejudice, was dissolving before their eyes. Their names still hung above the service desk, but the badges at their waists flashed red, their access denied. Each blink of light marked the end of something they'd always taken for granted: authority. As Amira handed the black card back into her wallet, a ripple of realization ran through the onlookers. The guests who had earlier only whispered, who had hesitated to intervene, now found themselves united, not just in anger, but in collective recognition. Something had been broken, but something more vital had been repaired. Elena Ruiz, the newly named acting manager, stood behind the front desk, her hands trembling at first, then steadying as she drew in a slow, deep breath. For so long, she'd known her role was simply to keep her head down, to stay out of the line of fire. But today, the rules had changed. Thank you, Dr. Blake, Elena said softly, her voice almost lost amid the buzz of conversation, the chimes of incoming messages, the shuffle of feet as guests reoriented themselves to the new reality. For seeing me, for seeing all of us. Amira met her gaze. You did what others were too afraid to do. That's real leadership. And starting today, that's what this place will be built on. Gregory, who had shrunk behind the safety of the front desk, tried to rally. His face had gone pale, his voice thin and ragged. You can't just fire us. There's a process. There are contracts. This is harassment. You'll regret this. You'll see. He tried to summon the authority that had once silenced a room, but it was gone. No one was listening, not even Lauren, whose face was streaked with mascara, her hands shaking as she stared at her locked-out phone, or Kevin, who stood frozen, lost in the ruins of his own bad decisions. A guest in a linen suit, who'd watched the entire scene unfold, finally broke the tension. "Maybe next time you'll treat everyone like they belong," he said, his tone pointed but not cruel. "Maybe you'll remember what happened today." Around the lobby, guests began to nod. Some applauded quietly, others offered Amira a smile or a wordless look of respect. The old codes had been shattered, but Amira was not finished. She stepped up onto the first step of the marble staircase that wound up toward the mezzanine, giving her a vantage point over the lobby. She didn't need a microphone. Her voice was clear, strong, and resonant. "I want everyone to know exactly what has happened here today," she began, "and I want you all to know why." The room grew still again, as if everyone understood that this was not a corporate speech or a PR exercise. It was something deeper, a reckoning, public and irreversible. For too long, hospitality in this country has been a lie. It has been about exclusion, about who looks like they belong, about who can pay and who can be profiled. I built Horizon Grand and the entire Horizon Hospitality Group because I believed there could be a better way. Today I watch my own staff, my own managers, try to throw me out of a lobby that bears my name on every document, every deed, every memory of what I survived to get here. Her eyes met the faces in the crowd. I didn't intervene at first because I wanted to see if anything had changed. I wanted to see whether after all these years, it was possible for someone who didn't look the part to be treated with respect. The answer was no. The answer was, still, no. There was an audible intake of breath from somewhere in the crowd, a sound of collective shame and revelation. But today, that answer changes. Not just for me, for all of you. A slow, purposeful applause began, growing in force until the lobby itself seemed to vibrate. Elena joined in, then the guests. Even some staff who had hung back out of fear or uncertainty now added their voices, unsure but hopeful. Gregory's anger, once a weapon, was now a shield he hid behind. "You're going to regret this, Blake. This is your funeral as much as mine." Amira looked down at him from the stairs. "If standing up for myself and for every guest who's ever been made to feel less than is a funeral, then let it be the end of everything that kept us silent." Lauren, voice broken, spoke into the hush. "Gregory said we had to protect the image of the brand. He said to be careful with certain kinds of guests, to look twice at cards, to delay, to double check, because that's what kept the wrong people out. He said it was for our safety." The words hung in the air, ugly and undeniable. Elena turned to Lauren, her tone soft but unyielding. "Safety for who?" Not for the guests who were profiled, not for staff who tried to speak up and were ignored. Kevin's bravado had vanished entirely. He looked at Amira with eyes full of regret. I didn't think it would get this far." Amira shook her head. "It always gets this far when nobody stops it." A guest's voice, high and quavering, rose from the crowd. "I complained about this desk last year. They lost my reservation, refused to help, and told me to wait outside. I thought it was just a mistake, but now I see it wasn't." Murmurs rippled through the guests, shared stories of small slights, dismissals, silent wounds that had gone unacknowledged. What had been private shame now became public testimony, the room slowly transforming from a place of exclusion to a forum for truth. Amira listened. She didn't interrupt. She let the crowd have their say. This was as much their reckoning as hers. When the voices faded, she spoke again, quieter but no less forceful. "You are all witnesses today, not just to my story, but to your own. I promise you things will change. Not with empty apologies, but with action." She turned to Elena. "Effective immediately, all existing management policies are suspended. There will be a full audit of every complaint filed in the last 3 years. Any staff member found to have ignored or enabled discrimination will face consequences. Real consequences." Elena nodded, determination shining in her eyes. "Understood, Dr. Blake. I'll see to it personally." Amira faced the staff, her gaze sweeping over those who had hung back, uncertain whether to defend the old regime or embrace the new. You are not required to stay if you can't commit to these standards. There will be no more second chances for bigotry, no more hiding behind policy. A woman from housekeeping, her eyes glistening with tears, spoke up for the first time. Thank you, Dr. Blake. I've seen so many good people turned away or made to feel small. Thank you. Amira smiled, a genuine, gentle smile. You don't have to thank me. Just help me make sure it never happens again. In the far corner, Jacob, still live streaming, addressed his audience. You're watching the real-time reform of an entire company. If only more leaders had this kind of courage. His chat exploded with support. This is history. Protect Dr. Blake at all costs. This is what justice looks like. As the crowd began to disperse, the tension that had once filled the room was replaced by something new. A tentative hope. The sense that something rare and necessary had just occurred. Amira didn't linger on the applause. She slipped quietly from the staircase, moving toward the front desk where Elena was already shutting down the old login terminals, erasing the digital fingerprints of those who no longer belonged. Gregory, Lauren, and Kevin were escorted out, not by security, but by the silent disapproval of the guests and staff alike. No one jeered, no one gloated. The punishment was not in the spectacle, but in the simple public loss of privilege. As they reached the doors, Gregory turned for one last desperate plea. You're making a mistake, Amira. You need people like us to keep things running smoothly. Amira didn't answer him. She didn't need to. The quiet that followed was answer enough. When the doors swung shut behind them, Elena looked to Amira. What happens next? Amira surveyed the lobby. Her lobby, at last reclaimed. Now, she said, we rebuild. Not just the policies, but the very idea of what this place stands for. Horizon Grand is no longer just a name above the door. It's a promise. And as the sunlight slipped through the glass doors, painting the marble floors with gold, everyone in the room knew they'd witnessed something that would not be forgotten. For the first time in a very long while, the air inside the Horizon Grand was different. Not stale with the secrets of 1,000 denials, but new, sharp, like rain after a storm. The marble floors still shone, the velvet chairs still curved with silent elegance. But what hummed under the chandeliers now was not exclusion or suspicion. It was the start of something raw, honest, and, for everyone watching, irrevocable. The moment the doors closed behind Gregory, Lauren, and Kevin, it was as if a spell had been broken. The energy in the lobby shifted. Where there had been fear and tension, there was now a restless buzz of possibility. Guests lingered, reluctant to retreat to their rooms. Some stayed because they were still in shock, others because they wanted to see what would happen next, and a few, maybe the most important ones, because they sensed they just witnessed the very moment a new history was born. Amira did not bask in victory. She moved quietly to Elena's side, where the young acting manager was already fielding questions from guests and remaining staff. Some were practical. Would bookings be honored? Would there be delays? Others were more personal. Was it safe to speak up now? Would things really change? Elena looked to Amira for reassurance. Amira nodded, her voice steady. Every guest with a valid reservation will be taken care of. Anyone who feels they've been mistreated, even in the smallest way, can come forward. I promise you, we're listening now. There was a long pause as her words settled over the group. An elderly woman, her hands shaking, approached the desk and spoke so softly Elena had to lean in to hear. Thank you, the woman said. Last year I complained about being ignored and talked down to a check-in. I got a form letter. Nothing ever changed. I was afraid to say anything again. Elena squeezed her hand. I'm sorry. It should never have happened. It won't happen again. Not here, not anymore. Nearby, Daniel, still live streaming, his phone battery now flashing red, turned the camera on himself and spoke to his growing audience. I've never seen anything like this in real life. The CEO came in quietly, just like any other guest. And when she was pushed out, she stood up for herself and everyone else who's ever been shut out. He paused, emotion thick in his voice. This is what accountability looks like. Sierra wiped a tear from her cheek, her face glowing with fierce pride. I'll never delete this footage, she said to Amira. The world needs to see it. Amira smiled, but her mind was already moving forward. turning the wheel of change. She called Nina and Carla, her executive team, to the center of the lobby. The conversation was swift, businesslike. Suspend all automated check-ins until further notice. Every guest will be welcomed personally by Elena or a member of her team. I want an audit of all guest complaints from the last 3 years. Reach out directly to anyone who was ignored, profiled, or dismissed. Carla, ever efficient, was already taking notes. Should we announce the management change to the press or wait for the inevitable leaks? Announce it, Amira said without hesitation. The narrative belongs to us, not to rumor. We own this story now. Nina's voice was brisk but warm. And the staff? Amira turned to the remaining employees, who stood clustered together, some afraid, some relieved, all uncertain. She addressed them openly. Anyone who feels they cannot embrace a new culture of transparency and respect is free to leave with severance. For those who stay, we'll have intensive retraining starting tomorrow. Not just in service, but in the values this brand was supposed to stand for from the beginning. A middle-aged man in housekeeping, his uniform faded at the collar, spoke up. Dr. Blake, I want to stay, I want to help, but I'm scared it'll just go back to the old way. Amira faced him, her eyes unwavering. It won't. Not as long as I'm here. And I'm not going anywhere. I've seen too much and I've worked too hard to walk away now. There was a ripple of applause, not the polite kind, but a genuine outpouring of gratitude. Staff who had been invisible for years, overlooked and underpaid, suddenly felt seen. A quiet dignity returned to them, a sense of hope. Elena moved through the lobby, helping guests, answering questions, assuring each person that their stay was a priority. She delegated with the steady confidence of someone born for leadership, but held herself with humility, never forgetting the lesson of what it meant to speak up when it mattered most. As the night deepened, the news began to spread beyond the lobby. Jacob's stream had gone viral, clips already circulating on social media under hashtags like #Horizon Grand Change and #Stand with Amira. Local reporters called, requesting statements. National outlets tweeted about the CEO who fired her own staff in the lobby. For the first time, the hotel's reputation, once built on exclusion, was being rebuilt on the foundation of truth. But with the glare of attention came a second wave. Emails, calls, and messages from guests and employees in other Horizon properties. Some reached out with thanks, others with stories of similar mistreatment, all hoping that what happened in Seattle might ripple outward. Amira gathered her leadership team for an impromptu midnight meeting in the now quiet bar, Elena at her side. She listened to every voice, every concern. They spoke of years of frustration, of customers who were never heard, of good people who left because they didn't fit the image. Amira wrote it all down. Then she looked around the table. Exhaustion and determination etched in her face. This is where it changes, she said. Not just for us, but for every Horizon property. Starting tonight, we launch a company-wide review. Every complaint, every hiring record, every dismissal. I want to know the truth, and I want everyone else to know it too. No more hiding, no more mercy for silence. Carla, who had seen more corporate crisis than most, smiled for the first time all night. You know this is going to make you a target, right? Amira nodded, calm and resolute. That's always been true. But now, if they come for me, at least I'll know I stood for something real. Elena took Amira's hand beneath the table, a small, private gesture of solidarity. You taught me today that one voice, if it's loud enough, can wake a whole room. And it did. By dawn, the news had swept across the city. Editorials praised Amira's courage. Pundits debated her confrontational style. But most just marveled at the simplicity of her message. Hospitality is about respect, not appearance. In the weeks that followed, more stories poured in from across the country. Some were inspiring. Employees emboldened to stand up to injustice. Managers apologizing and making amends. Guests returning to properties they had sworn off for years. Others were painful. Revelations of patterns long ignored. Apologies long overdue. Amira weathered it all. She fielded interviews, held staff forums, personally wrote to guests who'd been harmed. She promoted Elena to general manager not for her loyalty, but for her courage. Elena became a symbol, within and beyond Horizon, of what it meant to lead with heart and conviction. But perhaps the most profound change was in the hotel itself. Gone was the chill of suspicion at check-in, replaced by warm greetings and genuine smiles. Guests who might once have been profiled for their accent, their clothing, or the color of their skin now found their names remembered and their stories welcomed. Employees once silenced by fear found new confidence to raise their voices, not just to criticize, but to improve. The framed portrait of Amira that now hung beside the front desk was not a monument to her ego, but a promise to every guest. This space belongs to every guest, no exceptions. The plaque beneath it said it all. One afternoon, as the sun spilled through the tall lobby windows, a young girl and her mother approached Amira. The girl, barely 12, looked up and asked, "Are you really the owner?" Amira crouched down, meeting her eyes. "Yes, I am." "Did you really fire all those people because they were mean to you?" Amira smiled softly. "Not just because they were mean to me, because they were mean to everyone, and no one stopped them until today." The girl grinned. "I want to own a hotel when I grow up." Amira laughed, a deep, genuine sound. "Then you'd better get started. The world needs more people like you." As mother and daughter walked away, Elena watched them go, her heart full. The lobby, once a stage for quiet cruelty, was now a place of possibility. And in the months and years that followed, the world remembered what had happened in those 9 minutes in Seattle. How a woman who refused to be erased fired her entire staff in public, and, more importantly, how she built something better in its place. The story did not end in the lobby. It began there,